Hey, Renter Retires. It's Adam Schroeder here with another episode, joined as usual by Zach Lemaster, the founder and CEO of Renter Retirement. We are pleased to be joined Tom Zeeb. He is a real estate investing dad. You may have also heard his voice as the host of the Art and Science of Real Estate Negotiation podcast. Tom, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. So we like to start at the beginning, the origin story. Tell us about, when you started looking at real estate and what was your first deal. And, since you're talking about real estate negotiation, how did you actually get that deal under contract? Did you find a deal or, talk yourself into a better one, or what did that look like?
Oh boy. Let's see. Lots to unpack there. I had
No pressure.
Pretty massive disaster at the beginning. So dial the clock back to about 2001. And I was broke as a joke. I had a day job. I wasn't happy with it. After a while, you can't go anywhere. You're not really achieving you're stuck in the system. I felt like there was an entrepreneurial spirit. I had no idea how to tap into that. I added up my debt. I was 113 grand in the hole. I mean, just horrible spending habits and money habits and all that debt piling up from college and everything else. So I did the only logical thing. I escaped from it all. I just ignored it and went on a giant adventure trip with some buddies, took a vacation for a couple of weeks and went whitewater rafting in India. And things didn't go that well on that raft. I mean, it was a great trip. It was a lot of fun. But at one point, I went flying off the raft in a class 5 rapid and got sucked underwater. It wasn't, there was a while where I was going, oh man, I'm going to black out because I haven't had anything. There's no air. I need to breathe. And instead of getting scared, I was angry. It was a strange feeling. I was angry that I don't know, like, wow, all I've done is graduate from college with a degree in history and work myself into a crap ton of debt. So things got worse and worse. And I said, I'm going to find a way out. When I get out of this, I'm going to find a different way. Well, I got out of it. I got back home and nothing had changed. I was still stuck in the same job with the same debt. Well, more debt now from the cost of the trip. And I had no way out until a friend of mine, out of the blue, hands me a copy of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I'm sure probably most of your listeners have read because it gets around everyone. It's awesome. It's an awesome book, but it doesn't give you a lot of how-to, but it told me what to do. And so it kind of answered that question. I realized I'm a frustrated entrepreneur. Hey, Rich Dad says do real estate. I'll do real estate. So I ran out and bought a 6-unit building in New York City, landlord-friendly New York City. How well that worked out. And instead of the $800 a month cash flow I thought I was going to get, I was basically losing even more. And so I made a bad situation worse until things turned around when I discovered real estate wholesaling, and I had in my next deal that I had lined up, even though this one was a disaster. I kept trying. I thought I was going to rehab it, but luckily somebody offered to buy the contract from me, which I had never heard of. Didn't even know you can do that. And they paid me almost 23 grand. And that started to turn everything around. I said, yeah, I can just focus on the parts I actually like, the marketing and the negotiation. And it took me about 6 months. I paid off all my debt and I've never looked back.
So what are you doing now, Tom? And thank you for that, kind of life transformation story. I love hearing about the mindset of things. I also started in wholesaling. I mean, I technically bought my first house hack or rental first, and then kind of tapped into wholesaling and flipping, and eventually just decided that, real estate ownership long-term, that's how you really build wealth.
Yeah.
You can make a buck flipping or wholesaling or whatever, which is good when you don't have an extra buck, but wealth is built through real estate ownership. I want to talk about negotiation, but before we get there, what was after that one, right? What was the next step? You're like, okay, you got the bug. Did you do more wholesale deals? Did you decide that, you wanted to get into the rental game? What was next for you?
I eventually got into a little bit of everything, but for quite a few years, I think burned by the, losing that 6-unit building, I stayed as solely a wholesaler and just focused on making money because that's what I needed at that time. Then I got into some rehabs and then I got into some buy and holds. So I do a little bit of all the big three because there's a commonality to all of them. Everyone gets kind of obsessed with exit strategy, but honestly, it's finding the deal from marketing and making the deal from negotiation that count. then you do whichever exit strategy fits you best at that point in time.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are attracted to the idea of newer investors, at least, to like wholesaling or possibly burring or flipping or whatever the case is, because they see that they can build equity, or they can force equity, or sell stuff, or flip it, or and turn a contract with well, a lot of gurus would tell you minimal effort. We both know that sometimes deals fall in your lap, but generally speaking, like you're building a business around that, but you're just trading one job for another. But we usually see transitions of people getting into buy and hold real estate. That's not as sexy and exciting, right? You don't get this, big paycheck initially up front, but it's also one-time paycheck, right? It's trading I think whatever the saying is, a short nickel instead of trading it for the long time. But like over time, buy and hold, I think it's interesting to see a lot of people go into, that's where the tax benefits are. That's where wealth is built. There's some people that maybe don't want to leave your job, right? And maybe you are best just working in your career path and then just buying real estate as an asset. That's what a lot of our investors do. But let's make a transition. You're, an expert in the industry of negotiation. You wrote an infamous book. Your business is built around negotiation. Talk to us about negotiation. I mean, all the skill sets that a aspiring investor needs to have, where does negotiation land? And how would someone start to become a better negotiator?
Yeah, I think it lands smack dab in the middle of what you need to do. And yet it gets glossed over. Maybe people don't view it as the sexy, desirable part of the business because nobody seems to want to focus on it, or they're afraid that that's where the work is. But I actually totally disagree. I think it's the fun part of the business. It's the one part that'll get you more deals and more profit out of each deal, no matter what exit strategy you choose. So it needs more focus than ever. And it's fun because you can turn it into, you can almost treat it like a bit of a game. But you're trying to see how much better of a price you can get, and you're trying to see how many people you can get to say yes to you in those deals. And when I had started studying it, I realized there was very much, it didn't have to be this random, a lot of fellows always think, oh, I'm a great negotiator naturally. There's a science behind it that if you can follow that and break it down, there's very set patterns that people have. It's kind of human psychology based. I know that if I say something a certain way, I'll get a certain type of response. Or if I do a certain technique, it'll 9 out of 10 times get the exact kind of response out of the other party. And so as long as I'm using those to put downward pressure on the price to get down to what works for both parties. And if it doesn't work for both parties, they're not going to say yes. And when people go, oh, well, negotiations kind of is forcing somebody to do something they don't want to do. No, it's not. It's forcing people. It's bringing people to make a decision of what works for them and what doesn't.
Is negotiation always about price?
No. Excellent question. As investors, that's usually our number one goal. We've got to get the price right to make it work for us. But done right, if you really want to create the true win-win scenario, then both parties can't be having price as their number one concern. Because if price is my number one concern and it's your number one concern, well, then there's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser because we're fighting over the same thing. Which is why when I market, I look for motivated sellers that have a problem that they need to solve. And solving that problem is their number one most important issue, not price. And that's the big difference. Then I can win on price and they can win on having their problem solved. And we have that true win-win, which of course, some people say, oh, win-win's kind of cheesy. That doesn't really work. It absolutely works. You just can't be arguing about the same thing.
So how do you recommend, like, whenever you go into these things, how do you determine what they want to negotiate about? I mean, you as the investor go in there and you say, I'm going to negotiate about the price. Like, do you just flat out go in and say, what do you want out of this? Or do you have some ways you can figure out what their negotiating platform is?
Yeah, you flat out ask. So I'll start off with, why are you selling the property? And then learn to listen rather than talk more. Just ask these very brief, open-ended questions and get them rolling. What's their problem? I mean, if you marketed to people with problems, which you ought to be doing, then they have an issue. They've inherited the property, or they're a tired landlord, or it's a divorce scenario, or it's one of these other kind of classic things that can motivate somebody. You get them talking about that. Most people are more than willing to talk about their problems. And the more you spend time, I call it pinpointing, you pinpoint what their problem is by asking them questions. Well, once you've pinpointed those issues, now you can package up a solution that would work for them.
Let me tell you, I want to get your opinion on this. You're an expert in negotiation, Tom, and I want to tell you kind of some things that I believe found to be true in negotiation over time. Some things that I kind of reflect on when I'm entering a negotiation, and I wanted to ping you with that question about negotiation being about price, because in my personal opinion, negotiation, like a lot of people, I think it's really short-sighted to focus on negotiations as about price, as if a lot of people end up ruining what I'm going to say is a long-term potential partnership, being so forced on negotiating like a price on a single property up front. Now, a lot of what you've talked about so far has been a scenario of, okay, kind of this business model where you are marketing to distressed sellers, right? Like the goal is to buy a property, and I don't know how much you get into the creative finance space, in the terms, but to buy a property at a price point that makes sense for you. Obviously, if you're wholesaling, you're buying it under market value because there's distress on the property or property owner, it's a dilapidated house, it's a probate, whatever. And then you can, go and sell that opportunity to another investor or flip it or whatever. But just in the big picture of real estate investing, negotiation is extremely important. And I think a lot of people get so focused up front. Like I guess what I'm saying is if there's an opportunity for you to create a long-term relationship with someone where they are business partnership, or where you're going to be doing multiple deals together. For example, a lot of our investors buy with us for, over time. That's the goal. Maybe negotiation maybe it's not best for you to come in and like always try to be beating down the door of price, right? Because then you actually lose sight of a lot of maybe opportunity. I mean, some of our best investors, basically the turnkey space, like our prices are set, like we don't even set them, right? Like they're set. But there's not a lot of room for negotiation there, but someone could maybe come in if let me ask Adam this, because I feel like I'm a little all over the place. But Adam, if you have an investor you're working with and that, this guy is always, going to try to beat you up on price, and you kind of basically have set the stage that, like he's going to make the transaction difficult for you, and, it just doesn't work. And then you have another guy that's like, hey, he makes it easy for you to, transact with him. And he's not always knocking on the door. Who are you going to send the best deals to first?
The guy who's not going to fight me.
Yeah, just make it easy, right? So, sometimes you got to think about that. But anyways, let me get back to some rules of thumb that I've learned about negotiation. And this is maybe, as I think about this, like extends beyond real estate, right? Like being a married man with children, everything is a negotiation, right? With my wife, with my toddler, every breakfast every morning is a negotiation, right? Like there's a psychology behind it. But what I found is, I think the best thing that you mentioned, Tom, is that if you listen, like listening to the situation, right, understanding truly what you need, what their needs are, and this is again anything business, certainly true in real estate. But if you need to understand what someone wants to accomplish, and if you can provide a solution for them, you can craft a scenario where it makes sense for you. Also, I think so. Listening is a key part of that. You called that out. I also really feel like with new people, like building a relationship and building rapport, if people like you and if you can mirror them in their discussions, then maybe they might be a little bit more open to, I don't know, how much psychology do you get into with that of like mirroring people's emotions and trying to build rapport with them before like just beat down the door price or whatever the case is. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, lots. So I think that gets when you're a little more immediate to advanced on the negotiation side, you can start to think more about that. But you definitely, you have an angle and you have to, you want to be mirroring back what the other people say. Now, it's interesting. You've said beat down the price a couple of times. See, I don't ever go into it like I'm only going to get my price. That's the high pressure sales mentality. That's not what I would argue is my negotiation mentality. I go in trying to solve their problem. So I'm asking them what their problems are and maybe adding a little salt to those wounds, which I view as doing them a favor, because if they don't solve their problem, they're going to get into deeper trouble. And even I may not be able to help them at that point. So when I can solve their problem and still get it at a price that I need, I'm not going in beating them down for price. I'm going in trying to solve their problem and see if I can still get that at a price that works for me. whether I'm going to buy and hold it, whether I'm going to rehab it, whether I'm going to wholesale it, whether it's commercial. It doesn't matter what the exit strategy is. It matters how we come in on that. And so a lot of times when you building rapport is talking to somebody. So it's quite a matter of just having a conversation. And when you start to peel off layers of the onion on someone's problem and get them to confide more and more in you, that's a sign of a level of trust. That level of trust is the deepening of the rapport between you. And that's important.
So are there different techniques for, wholesaling, flipping, getting a buy and hold like turnkey? Is it all the same, or do you have to tweak it based on, what transaction you're doing or what type of real estate you're in?
From a negotiation standpoint, it's all the same. Now, the price that I can get it at might change slightly. If I'm doing the rehab, then I don't need as deep of a discount because I don't need to go deeper than what the rehabber would buy it for. If I'm wholesaling, I have to have a little bit deeper so that I make a wholesale fee. And the same thing if I'm setting up as a buy and hold. When I buy my buy and holds, I know what I need to buy them at, so I negotiate to that price. If I'm trying to wholesale it to a buy and hold investor, then I have to go to that point and a little bit further so that I have a wholesale fee.
And so whenever you're, just teaching people this, what seems to be the biggest sticking point? What's the hardest thing for people to wrap their minds around? Is it just you're not going to get everything you want whenever you go into this, or what's the hardest thing for people to get over?
So I think it's the fear of asking the questions, the fear of being a little bit forward with people, a fear of delving into their problems and adding a little salt to the wounds, which is why I phrase it to my students the same way I just said to you guys, which is you're doing them a favor by putting some salt in the wound. Because if they don't step up and solve their problem, like when I'm dealing with somebody in pre-foreclosure, if they don't wake up and solve that problem, they're going to lose the property. If they got a tax rent, they're going to lose that property. If I can kind of get them to understand that and actually take action, I've done them a massive favor. I don't need to be shy about kind of pushing and trying to control them to take some action now. It'd be the same with probate scenario. I've had families where they've been sitting on grandma's property for 5 or 6 years and nobody can come to an agreement. Meanwhile, the place is getting worse and worse. It's falling apart more and more. They've been paying a tax bill pointlessly. And so when you get in there and put some salt in that wound and say, hey, guys, listen up. Does it really have to, how many more years are you going to put up with it like this? Why don't you cash out and get this done? Now, there's always disagreements between the siblings and whatnot. And a lot of times I have to referee those siblings. That's part of the negotiation as well. So what does each party want and how can I get them to agree together? That way they then agree with me and sign a contract.
Yeah, we always, going back to your win-win scenario, a lot of people, I think, have this limiting belief that in real estate, and I think this comes from the traditional sales method of just buying stuff off the MLS, is that one person is losing, one person's winning, or one person's receding, right? It's typically around price because that's the only potential variable that people are aware of. If it's listed on the MLS, well, this is what I'll buy it at, and this was, or whatever. But man, there's just so much more in real estate. To use an example, this is, negotiation is so important. But we just went under contract with. Right now, we're buying. So one of many asset classes we buy is luxury short-term rentals in the mountains here in Colorado. And what we've seen is that there's been a lot of properties that have been sitting on the market for a long period of time because they're expensive, higher end properties. There's not a lot of buyers. Interest rates are obviously limiting the buyers and investor activity. But we're coming out of this era where over the past 3 to 4 years, we've had, crazy high appreciation and price points, and sellers are still holding on to that notion that they could probably sell it. So what we see eventually is that there's these properties that are sitting on the market for, months and sometimes years and no activity, and then they become expired listings, and we go after those expired listings at least to try to work directly with the seller. But there was this elderly lady that has a ski and ski out house in Breckenridge that it's a perfect location, high-end property, super ugly and dated. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's just older. But, she had her price. She was stuck on her price. That's it, whatever the case is. But she didn't have any debt on it. It was free and clear. And after about like 4 or 5 months of negotiation, going back on different ways, like we structured a scenario. She finally accepted the fact she can't sell on the MLS. And we structured a scenario where we can provide a retirement picture for her. We can take that property over because it's not something she wants to continue to maintain. She's like 80 something, and she just, she wanted something to pay her for the next 10 years or whatever the case is as a retirement. I'll think about it. And we were able to structure it. And I can't go and buy it at 7% or whatever. That wouldn't make sense. So we gave her price, but we created a term where we're paying her, So that's just one real life example. Like, you can create scenarios where other people don't see opportunity. I think that's a beautiful thing when you're matching creativity and negotiation and, and sometimes a little creative finance in there.
That's a perfect example of what I was saying, right? She won because she's got her retirement plan now for the rest of her life. You won because you got a deal at the rate and terms that you wanted.
And the caveat there too is, honestly, we showed her like, hey, like your capital gains, like you're going to pay a significant amount of money right out of the gates on this thing, right? So like we were able to create a little bit of a payment over time structure where, she doesn't take that huge hit. Let me ask you this though, kind of as we wrap up, Tom. I tell our team all the time that we're not in the real estate business, we're in the communication business. Mm-hmm. And I think that real estate business in general, certainly negotiation, it's all about effective communication. Would you agree with that? Do you have any recommendations on how to be an effective communicator?
Yeah, talk and listen, right? Learn to talk. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and then listen to what they're saying, reflect it back to them. When they realize that you have ideas about how to solve their problem, and it may not be the same thing they've heard from everyone else, because particularly when properties are listed, there's not a lot of creativity there. It's just kind of, it's just there's one way of doing it. And now as the market shifted and that way doesn't work that well anymore, they're going to want to listen to someone that has, I've got 3 or 4 or 5 different ideas. And this is how we can structure it, and this is how it would work. And like you said, hey, did you know about the capital gains? This is how we have to structure. You want to be taken care of for the rest of your life. We can set that up easy. So suddenly you're this creative problem solver, and that fits very well with what's happening now. I'm excited for the market downturn. I know that sounds ridiculous, right? Because everyone else is crying that the sky is falling. But I'm excited because more motivated sellers are going to need the solutions that only a creative investor can provide.
Yeah, your problem solver, I think, is what it comes down to. And that's where you create, the best type of deals. I usually, in these type of scenarios, I usually give people options, right? We usually give out offers of like, hey, is my price or your terms? And so we can buy it at this. And if we buy it at this is how we, if you're stuck on price, this is how we structure the deal. Or we can buy it at this price, right? And that's our price. But I usually give them at least 2 options.
Which is good. That's a great negotiation technique, because if I give you one offer, you can say yes or you can say no. There's only 2 choices. But if I give you 2 offers, now you're debating between the offers. So offer A, offer B, offer A, offer B. You're almost forgetting that you actually have a third option, which is, no. You could still say no, but now you're actually thinking about it. So never make one offer. Always make at least 2 offers. The more offers, the better, because then people are debating within your offers. And yeah, they could still say no, and they still might, but that's not their focus. They're not focused on saying no. And that's important.
What about on the flip side? Because you mentioned like whenever you wholesale, whenever you flip, whenever you do this, when you do that, when you're the one exiting the deal and you want to negotiate with a buyer as opposed to the seller, what does that change, or how does that dynamic change in that front?
So on the buyer side, when I'm selling, so I'm selling or I'm assigning out of a contract, I want to pay attention to make sure that I don't give them as many grounds to work my price down. So that means I've got to really support my statement of price, my statement of the repair cost, my statement of the rents, depending what type of deal it is. And so the power of the written word is a big negotiation technique where you want to prove things when you can. So, hey, these are the MLS comps. Don't just take my word for what the price is. Look at the actual comps. Or hey, this is my repair estimate, but take a look at the photo gallery, because now you confirm that I'm not out of my mind. I'm not too high. I'm not too low. It should be just about right. So you always want to be proving what you can to support your prices. And then I go in usually aiming to not change my price much, with the exception is I know some of my buyers, they feel like they have to get a deal, so they have to get you down. So you pad your price up and then you throw it away and let it go. Or another technique is to put a number of different, ask for a number of different terms or conditions that you want. But if I want 5 things, maybe I only really care about 2 of them, but I put the other 3 in there as throwaways. If I get them, great. But if I need to throw things away, then I can show that I'm a flexible guy to work with because I'm throwing these things away and I'm conceding, but I'm still hanging on to the ones that I really care about. So they're almost like decoy requests.
Again, being an effective communicator, and I think showcasing with data points, like proving your case of why this is a good opportunity, showing them the opportunity and showing them the math. I love people showing people the math.
Yeah.
Let the math do the negotiation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining us today. The website is tomzeeb.com. Tell people a little bit about what they'll find there.
You find my podcast, The Art and Science of Real Estate Negotiation, where I bring you through all different angles on negotiation, how to become a better negotiator, how to start negotiating, what to do as an advanced negotiator. It's all focused on negotiation between my trainings and interviews with other people that I've trained and how they've used it to do successful real estate deals.
All right. Well, that's tomzeeb.com. If you have any questions for us that you'd like us to talk about in future episodes, and maybe even something we need to run by Tom to see what his answers are, please send those to podcast@renttoretirement.com. That's podcast@renttoretirement.com. We'll make sure we answer some of those in the future. And if you want to check out our inventory, we're, as Zach said, the negotiation on price isn't really there, but it's at renttoretirement.com. That's renttoretirement.com. Tom, really appreciate you joining us today. Can't tell you enough how much we appreciate it. And everyone else, thanks for spending your time educating yourself today. We'll talk to you on the next episode.
Thanks for watching the Rent to Retirement YouTube channel. Check out some of our other videos, like this one, or this one here.